Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today and welcome to the Works Clearinghouse webinar focused on study review protocols and understanding their development and purpose. I am Sarah Caverly with the American Institutes for Research and a Deputy Director for the Works Clearinghouse Statistics website and training contract. Before we get started, I just want to recognize that many of us are working from home, which offers its own challenges. And we truly appreciate having you join us today and to learn more about the Works Clearinghouse and our protocols. On today's webinar, the presenters will share information on how study review protocols are developed and implemented by the Works Clearinghouse review teams and reviewers. The team will also describe the different types of protocols used by the Works Clearinghouse. Our webinar will be led by two presenters, Dr. Sarah Sani and Herb Turner. Both are members of the Works Clearinghouse Statistics website and training team. Dr. Sani is a principal researcher at the American Institutes for Research who leads Works Clearinghouse evidence reviews and is an experienced WWC reviewer. Dr. Herb Turner is president and principal scientist of Analytica, is an adjunct professor of research methods at the University of Pennsylvania and Boston College, and has served as a reviewer for the Works Clearinghouse since its inception. Both presenters have been engaged in the refinement of the Works Clearinghouse's protocols, standards, and procedures. Throughout the webinar, we will be sharing links to resources within the chat box. We will also be monitoring the questions box for questions from you. Near the end of the webinar, presenters will respond to the questions that you pose both during registration as well as the ones submitted today, if possible. While we may not be able to address all of the questions during the webinar, responses to all of the questions received will be included in the webinar archive materials posted to the WWC website. The learning goals for our webinar today include learning about the different types of WWC protocols used by reviewers, describing the protocol development process, and providing details on how protocols are used to guide WWC reviews. With that, I'll turn the webinar over to our first presenter, Herb, who will walk us through the different types of WWC protocols.
Thank you for that introduction and overview of the learning goals, Sarah. We're looking forward to sharing the information available through today's webinar. As this slide shows, I would like to begin by defining what is a WWC review protocol. A WWC review protocol defines the scope of a WWC systematic review. Developed with substantive experts, the protocol defines the parameters for the review, including the eligible interventions, settings, research, and outcomes. The protocol also specifies details of the literature search and any topic-specific applications of the design standards in the most recent version of the WWC Handbook. And importantly, protocol versions reflect the version of WWC design standards in the WWC Handbook that are in effect when the protocol was released. Now, regarding this last point, protocol versions that predate the current version of the WWC Standards Handbook can be used to identify acceptable outcome domains for review within a given topic. For example, although the Early Childhood Review Protocol was last updated as version 3.0, and the Procedures and Standards Handbook are in versions 4.1, the outcome domains can still be used to identify acceptable outcomes for early childhood interventions in a WWC review of individual studies or in the citing of evidence of effectiveness for these interventions in an IES-funded grant competition. Because the current WWC standards, that is version 4.1, are used to guide the review of studies with acceptable outcomes established in the protocols, I would like to provide a brief historical perspective on how the standards have evolved during the past 20 years. Historically, The WWC systematic review procedures and standards have been in place since 2002 and were disseminated publicly for the first time in May 2008 as Handbook 1.0. Since then, as this slide shows, there have been 4 generations of revisions. And as we start at the very left, at the far left of this slide, you can see that the first 2 versions of the handbook, versions 1.0 through 2.1, covered both systematic review procedures and evidence standards for RCTs and QEDs exclusively. In version 3.0, cluster level studies and threats to their internal validity were addressed for RCTs and QEDs, and pilot standards for single case designs were introduced. In version 4.0, systematic review procedures and evidence standards were covered in separate handbooks for the first time. One handbook for systematic review procedures and another handbook for evidence standards. And under 4.0, standards for regression discontinuity designs were also added. And finally, in version 4.1, single case design standards have been fully incorporated. Additional clarifications and examples were also provided throughout both handbooks. And evidence from multiple studies and intervention reports are now characterized using fixed effects meta-analyses. This current slide shows the WWC protocols developed or updated under major revisions to the standards and procedures in the handbooks. Again, starting from the left of this slide, there were 17 new protocols published under and governed by version 1.0 on topics such as adult literacy, beginning reading, English learners, early childhood education, dropout prevention, and quick reviews, to name a few. Of these original 17 protocols under version 1.0, 11 were updated under version 3.0, and 10 new protocols were published, for a total of 21 protocols under version 3.0, as shown in the middle column of the table. And finally, of these 21 protocols under 3.0, 9 were updated under version 4.0, and 4 new protocols were developed, for a total of 13 protocols under version 4.0. Of the 4 new review protocols were on the following topics: post-secondary career and technical education interventions, school leadership, primary science, and supportive learning environments. The purpose of this slide is to provide you with a general sense of the protocol topic areas that have been updated most frequently and consistently since the Clearinghouse began in 2002. Starting again to the far left column, that's labeled topic area, this slide shows there have been 4 topic areas updated at least 3 times since handbook version 1.0. The protocols listed in this column are in order of first published under standards 1.0. As the slide shows, beginning reading and English language learners are 2 of the earliest published protocols. The beginning reading protocol was released under standards 3.0, and it is slated to be updated for reviews of beginning literacy interventions under the current standards. So there are plans to update this protocol. The English language protocol is current under standards 4.0. The review of individual studies and adolescent literacy protocol in the last 2 rows of this table are also among the earliest and most frequently updated protocols that are current under 4.0. And my colleague, Sarah Sarani, will have much more to say about the review of individual studies in adolescent literacy protocols during this webinar. Now I'd like to talk about what's new in version 4.1 that impacts review protocols. And there are three areas. The first is the Educational Resources Information Center, known as ERIC, is now the initial source of studies for WWC reviews. Secondly, version 4.1 provides guidance on what manuscripts take precedence in WWC reviews when multiple manuscripts are available. And this is 4.1 in terms of the procedures handbook. And thirdly, master's theses can be included in literature searches for reviews. Now, regarding this second point I made, protocol authors now have additional discretion to specify relevant search procedures and multidisciplinary databases for topic areas. And for more on these topics, I would encourage you to reference the WWC Procedures Handbook version 4.1. As I alluded to at the start of this webinar, each WWC review assesses a study of an intervention that is reviewed under a protocol that defines any topic-specific applications of the design standards as expressed in the current versions of the Procedures Handbook and the Standards Handbook. As this slide shows, the current version of the WWC Standards Handbook 4.1 is shown in the left column of the table and establishes the default criteria. And the WWC topic area protocols, shown in the right column of the table, defines the topic-specific application, which may or may not use the handbook default. Historically, the first 5 criteria listed on the left and in the left column under the sets default criteria for the Standards Handbook, those 5 criteria, design, outcomes, confounds, attrition, and baseline equivalence, are foundational, and they have existed since the WWC started in 2002. An example of the protocol-specific application of the outcome criteria in the Standards Handbook is as follows. The default for internal consistency of an outcome is at least 5.50 in the Standards Handbook, while in the Adolescent Literacy Review Protocol, the minimum reliability for an outcome is higher. It's set at 0.60. 0.60, this is also the minimum reliability for outcomes in the Studies for Interventions to Support Post-Secondary Success Review Protocol. As an example of the protocol-specific application of the attrition boundary in the Standards Handbook, the example is as follows. The review team leadership can use its discretion to set the attrition boundary at cautious or at optimistic, depending on whether the attrition is deemed strongly related to group status, i.e., strongly related to being in the intervention or control group. In the Adolescent Literacy Review Protocol, the boundary is set to optimistic because it is assumed the attrition in studies of adolescent literacy are due to factors other than group status, such as family mobility or student absences on the days that assessments were conducted. The boundary is also set to optimistic in studies for interventions to support post-secondary success review protocol, as it is assumed that post-secondary students can have a range of life events that could lead them to have missing outcome data that are unrelated to intervention status. Continuing with the left column of this table, the remaining 3 criteria are also listed, and they're below the first 5 criteria. And these remaining criteria differentiate between cluster and individual random and non-random assignment, define risk of bias in cluster studies, and describe appropriate methods for missing data. For example, in cluster studies regarding the risk of bias due to joiners, that is, individuals who enter a cluster after random assignment, the Studies for Intervention to Support Post-Secondary Success Review Protocol says that all joiners, early and late, pose a risk of bias because study samples may be comprised of adults who can presumably choose their preferred education experiences and may join the study based on their choice of intervention status. There are some exceptions, however, and I would refer you to version 4.0 of this protocol to learn more. Now, I would like to turn the presentation over to my colleague, Sarah Sarani, who will talk about the types of WWC protocol.
Thanks, Herb. Now that Herb has introduced the protocols more generally, I'm going to cover the different types of WWC protocols. Many experienced reviewers are unaware that there are different types of protocols. 3 types of protocols are protocols for intervention reports, which are sometimes called topic area protocols or evidence review protocols, protocols for practice guides, and the last is the review of individual studies protocol. Intervention reports and practice guides are the 2 major products produced by the Works Clearinghouse. Intervention reports are a summary of high-quality research on a specific program, policy, or practice. These intervention reports can cover specific branded programs or more general practices. For example, there's an intervention report for the Incredible Years Early Childhood Program. This is a specific branded program that targets social and emotional skills for children with disabilities. There's another intervention report for play-based interventions for children with disabilities. This intervention report includes multiple play-based practices and is not of a specific branded program. To create an intervention report, the WWC searches the existing literature for research studies on the specific program or practice. WWC reviewers then review this existing literature, and the review team leadership synthesizes the findings of the reviews to create an intervention report. Here's an example of an intervention report. This is the intervention report for the Fraction Face-Off program, which teaches fractions to 4th graders. You can see that the intervention report starts with an introduction to the skills or the programs that are being addressed. Next, there's a brief description of what actually occurs in the course of the intervention. And finally, the findings of the systematic review are summarized. Intervention reports done under the new 4.1 standards will present the results of a fixed effects meta-analysis. The protocols for the intervention reports, sometimes referred to as topic area protocols, cover broad types of programs or practices and can be used for multiple intervention reports. For example, the Adolescent Literacy Topic Area Protocol can be used when reviewing any program or practice targeting literacy and reading outcomes for children in 4th through 12th grades. This adolescent literacy protocol guided probably hundreds of reviews that have led to 32 different intervention reports published on the WWC website. The second type of protocol I'm going to tell you about are protocols for practice guides. Practice guides present recommendations for educators to address a specific challenge in their classrooms or schools. These differ from intervention reports, which focus on the program or practice. On this slide, you can see covers from 3 different practice guides that illustrate the types of challenges practice guides address. Using technology to support post-secondary student learning, improving math problem solving in grades 4 through 8, and the last is preventing dropout in secondary school. These are nice examples of how practice guides focus on a challenge rather than synthesizing information on a specific program. Another difference between practice guides and intervention reports is that practice guide teams consult with a group of nationally recognized experts in addition to reviewing the research. The protocols for these practice guides are different than the intervention report or topic area protocols. Each practice guide has its very own protocol. Unlike topic area protocols, like the adolescent literacy protocol, which was used for 32 different intervention reports, each practice guide protocol is used for one specific practice guide. This is true even if there is an existing topic area protocol with overlapping scope. For example, a protocol was created for the Teaching Mathematics to Young Children practice guide, even though there was an existing topic area protocol for elementary mathematics interventions. Both protocols cover mathematics interventions for kindergartners. However, the practice protocol focuses only on pre-K and K, while the topic area protocol covers kindergarten all the way up to 5th grade. Similarly, practice guides may tailor the outcomes that are covered and reviewed, or may also tailor specific criteria in a way that differs from the existing topic area protocols. Practice guides may be more selective or broader than the intervention reports on similar topics. The last type of protocol is the Review of Individual Studies protocol. Sometimes the WWC reviews individual studies that are not part of a systematic review for an intervention report or a practice guide. Some examples are studies that receive significant media attention, studies funded by the Department of Education, which the WWC reviews, or studies reviewed as part of grant competitions. All of these studies are reviewed under the Review of Individual Studies protocol, or what we like to call it, the RISP. The RISP provides a single consistent protocol used to review each of these studies. That last set of studies, those reviewed as part of grant competitions, that is currently the most common application of the RISP. When researchers submit an application for a Department of Education grant, they cite existing research showing the efficacy of their programs. The WWC reviews all the studies to rate the strength of the evidence cited by each applicant. For these studies in particular, it is important that they are assessed by one consistent protocol so that each study is reviewed on the same set of standards. While topic area protocols and practice guide protocols cover a set of specific programs or an educational challenge, the RISP is used to review a much more diverse set of studies. The RISP can be used to review studies for programs of The RISP can be used to review studies of programs for young children with disabilities or programs for post-secondary students. Because of this, the RISP includes many outcomes. There are 59 outcome domains on the RISP, which fall into 8 broad categories. These include everything from short and long-term educational attainment to social and emotional learning and behavior, all the way up to labor market outcomes like employment and income. When a study is reviewed under the RISP, all the study findings in any of those domains are part of the official review. Whereas topic area and practice guide protocols include a smaller set of outcome domains. Therefore, it may be that only a subset of findings from a study are reviewed under intervention report and practice guide protocols. Next, Herb is going to tell us about how protocols are created.
Thanks, Sarah. With this background on the 3 types of protocols, let's turn to the question of who writes the WWC protocols and what is the process. As described in the WWC Procedures Handbook version 4.1 and confirmed through interviews with WWC review team leaders, writing a WWC protocol for intervention reports and single study reviews is a collaboration between review team leaders with methodological and content expertise and external content experts who are nationally recognized in their fields. As this slide shows, protocols for practice guides are developed by review team leaders also, but under the guidance of a panel of at least 6 members that consist of researchers with diverse content and methodological expertise, as well as practitioners with the background to offer guidance on implementing the recommendations. The panel is chaired by a nationally recognized expert in the topic. And as the slide also shows, the review team leaders, supported by the WWC research staff, works with the panel to develop the review protocol. Experienced review team leaders, typically with 5 to 15 years of experience, develop the review protocol for the topic area or practice guide in consultation with the external content experts for topic areas or a panel chair for practice guides. Finally, as the slide shows in the last bulleted point, writers and contributors, that is review team leaders, panel members, and supporting WWC research staff, must be approved by IES. As this slide shows, starting from the left, protocol development can be triggered by the release of a new version of the standards or by a new topic that IES approves. As we move to the middle box, the WWC review team leadership typically starts with a template and past protocols as examples and a starting point for the first draft. And later on, Sarah Sarani will be introducing an approach that will help move this idea forward. Nevertheless, when developing a protocol for a topic area, the review team considers the following criteria as a key focus. And now I'm speaking to the box on the far right. The key focus is purpose statement and review questions, types of interventions within the scope of the review, populations on which the review focuses, outcome domains, literature search parameters, including keywords, review-specific applications of the WWC standards in the handbook. Note that these are not the only criteria, but represent the criteria review team leaders reported as most often involving extensive thought, discussion, and revision. Regarding the process for protocol approval, again, starting from the left of the slide and moving to the right, after an extensive drafting and revision process, followed by multiple layers of internal review led by the review team leadership, the completed draft is submitted to IES. IES reviews the document internally and returns comments to the contractors drafting team, hence the arrows, the bidirectional arrows, indicating there can be some back and forth between IES review and the internal review team. And the drafting team or internal review team will respond to each comment and document all responses in a memo. Upon approval from IES, the document is uploaded to the WWC, or the approved protocol is uploaded to the WWC website. The update of a protocol can take approximately 2 to 3 months. The development of a new protocol can take longer, depending on the topic area. The primary criteria for review and approval of new or updated protocols is that they are well written and clearly describe the topic area, purpose, and question. The substantive and methodological areas reflect the current state of research, with the latter being consistent with and tailored to the current version of the handbook at the time of the review. And finally, topic-specific applications of the standard should be appropriate and consistently applied throughout. So now this time I will turn the presentation back over to Sarah Sarani, and she will cover the next topic.
Thanks, Herb. So a new tool to help in the protocol development and creation process is the protocol template. The protocol template was developed by the WWC team and is currently under review by IES. So why create a template? Why would it be useful or helpful? Well, the protocol template will provide guidance to all review teams on what should be included in the protocol and in what order. This will standardize section and contents across protocols, which are developed by different teams at different organizations. The standardization will make protocols easier to use and understand for all stakeholders. Reviewers will gain familiarity with the layout and they'll know where to find the information they need as they conduct their reviews, regardless of the project. This is especially helpful for reviewers who participate in multiple review projects, as the layout of the protocols will be consistent across all the reviews they participate in. So what's in the template? It has two documents, an outline providing headers and a guidance document. Here is a screenshot of the template document with the headers. This document helps standardize the ordering and sections across protocols. Here's a screenshot of the guidance document, or at least the first page. It describes the content that should be included in each section of the protocol and has references to default approaches in the handbooks with document and page numbers. Together, these two documents provide a great resource for teams that are creating protocols or updating older ones. In the next two slides, I'll give you an overview of the sections of the template. Each protocol will begin with the big picture information about the review. Protocols will start with the importance of the problem that the review is trying to address. For practice guides, this will discuss the central educational challenge addressed by the practice guide, such as why is it important to prevent dropout from secondary school? For intervention reports, what are the programs or practices under review trying to change or affect? The adolescent literacy topic area protocol may discuss the importance of ELA and literacy education for this age group. Next, the protocol will generally describe the types of interventions or practices being reviewed, how they might work, and who they are meant for. The next two sections of the protocol are the nitty-gritty of the criteria. These are the sections reviewers will consult and keep close when reviewing. And these are the sections that primary researchers will reference when trying to understand how their own study will be assessed by the WWC. It starts with the eligibility criteria. These are the basis for deciding whether a study is included in a review. Is the study looking at effects on the populations we are interested in? Is it examining the specific interventions or practices? Does it measure impact on the outcomes of interest? The next section goes into the specific criteria used for full reviews. How does this protocol tailor the standards that the handbooks identify as being flexible? This is the topic-specific implementation of the WWC standard section. This includes attrition thresholds, details around assessing and adjusting for baseline equivalence, standards related to the outcome measures, as well as considerations for studies with cluster-level assignment or single case designs. The last section of the protocol template, which is not shown here, is the literature search procedures section. Most of the more recent protocols have included a section on the literature search. However, with this template, we are codifying including it in all future protocols. This section should include the databases that are searched, the exact search terms used, including wildcards and truncation, and sources used for gray literature search. In this next section of the webinar, we're going to tell you how protocols are actually used in practice. So when you need or want a protocol, the first thing you need to do is to be able to find it. Conveniently, the protocols are all listed on the WWC website. Begin by navigating to the review protocol URL given here. This will also be listed in the chat box and on the resource slide. Next, select Handbook and Other Resources along the left side, and then select Review Protocols. This will take you to a web page that lists every WWC review protocol. There you can select the protocol you are interested in. For example, you can select the Beginning Reading Evidence Review Protocol. On each protocol's page, you'll see a high-level summary of the review and the research questions guiding the review. On the right side of the page, you'll see an option for document version. As Herb discussed in the beginning, a protocol may have several versions. The Beginning Reading Protocol, for example, has been updated 3 times. After you select the version of the protocol you're interested in, you can then read or download a PDF of the full protocol. So now that you have a protocol, how do WWC teams actually use it? Well, it turns out there are many members of the WWC review teams, and they have different roles in the review process and may use the protocols differently. The WWC recently created a video about who works on the WWC, describing these different roles and team members. That URL will be added to the chat box now and will be included on the resource slide. Review team leaders are the technical leads of the WWC review teams. They create protocols and oversee the whole review process. Review coordinators assist the team leadership in managing the review process. They help track the work and make sure it is progressing appropriately. Screeners are the staff members who decide if a study meets the eligibility criteria specified in the protocols. They determine whether a study goes on for a full review. Reviewers are certified WWC reviewers who do the full review. Excuse me. They use the handbooks and protocols together to give the study a rating, as well as code the findings. Each study is reviewed by 2 WWC-certified reviewers. The last member of the team are the reconcilers. Their job is to resolve any differences between the 2 reviews. All official WWC reviews are conducted within the Online Study Review Guide, or OSRG. When a study is identified for review, the review coordinator specifies the intervention, the standards version, the protocol and the protocol version, the review purpose, and the contract in the OSRG. The coordinator then assigns the study as a task to one of the reviewers. Next, the reviewer receives an email notification from the OSRG saying that they have a new task assignment. The reviewer goes ahead and logs into the OSRG. And after logging in, the reviewer will see the My Tasks dashboard. All of the studies assigned to them will be listed here. The protocol is included in that listing, as you see in that red box. The reviewer selects which study they would like to begin reviewing and begins the review process. While coding, the protocol and standards are listed on the screen. As we've talked about throughout this webinar, the review protocol affects some of the particular standards of the review. When the coordinator selects a protocol, this will affect some aspects of the OSRG. The protocol choice will predetermine the outcome domain options and will also affect the boundary used for determining if attrition rates are high or low for the review. However, there are a number of other criteria that the protocol may affect, but are not hard-coded into the OSRG. For example, the eligibility criteria, which is tailored by the protocol, is not specified in the OSRG. The OSRG will ask if the population is aligned with the protocol, but it will not tell you what the specific population of interest is. Similarly, things like exceptions to attrition standards or outcome measurement standards, or whether joiners pose a risk of bias, are not hard-coded in the OSRG. Reviewers will need to know to consult their protocol when making these assessments and judgments in the OSRG. Here is a screenshot of what the outcome domains and measures page looks like in the OSRG and how they are affected by protocol choice. When reviewing, you must identify the specific outcomes that are being coded. When you add a measure, you'll be given a list of outcome domains to select from. The list of outcome domains you can choose from will vary based on your protocol. With the beginning reading protocol, you'll have domain choices that include things like alphabetics and reading achievement. On this slide, you can see the outcome domain choices for the Workforce Development at Community Colleges Practice Guide protocol. For this protocol, the domains include college attendance, college enrollment, earnings, and employment. Now Herb will talk about how primary researchers should use the protocol.
Thanks, Sarah. Now that we have discussed how review teams use WWC protocols in practice, to conclude this section of the webinar, I would like to now address the question of what protocol should primary researchers use? This question is relevant for researchers who want to plan studies that meet WWC evidence standards or cite studies as evidence of effectiveness for U.S. Department of Education grant competitions such as EIR or SEED. We recommend that you use the Review of Individual Studies protocol, also known as RISP 4.0, as a starting point for 3 reasons. First, RISP addresses fundamental methodological considerations relevant to the protocol. Recall at the start of this webinar, I referred to the design, the outcomes, the confounds, the attrition, and baseline equivalence criteria that have been in place since the Works Clearinghouse's inception in 2002. The RISP provides guidelines on these particular criteria. For example, the RISP sets the boundary for attrition as optimistic and specifies the pre-intervention variables that can be used to establish baseline equivalence in the analysis sample. Secondly, RISP identify exactly which of the study findings may be eligible for a WWC review. And there are 59 domains, as Sarah had mentioned, covering 8 broad categories. In the RISP aligns these outcome domains to other protocols. So RISP can help identify a topic area protocol better suited for the intervention. And that's point number 3. So for example, if you're planning a study or citing a study for evidence of effectiveness in a grant competition that targets secondary school attendance and progress, you can start on page 6 of the RISP and see that this outcome domain maps to the Transition to College 4.0 review protocol. And you can commence then to examine that particular protocol more closely for more topic area specific applications, or also refer back to the RISP, which covers the fundamental categories. So to conclude, when aligning a study to a WWC protocol, whether you're a review team member or a primary researcher, it is important to remember that the primary and intended purpose of a WWC protocol is to provide guidelines and criteria for internally valid causal studies, framed and guided by the WWC Handbooks. And these guidelines and criteria are to be applied consistently, objectively, and transparently when reviewing studies to produce a WWC product, such as an intervention report or practice guide, or address a WWC-related need, such as reviewing a study that has received significant media attention. And with that, I'd like to turn the webinar back over to Sarah Caverly, who will moderate the question and answer part.
Great. Thank you, Sarah and Herb, for helping us understand the purpose of having protocols to guide WWC reviews. let's turn to questions from our participants about protocols. And just a reminder that we may not be able to address all of the questions received today and through registration. However, all of the responses will be included in the archived webinar materials, which will also include the slide deck and the recording of today's webinar and other information so that we have that ahead of time. So let's take a look at the questions. So Sarah, I'm hoping you can help me with the first question that we have, and it is, how do I know under which protocol my study will be reviewed?
Sure. So it depends on the reason for the review. Studies are reviewed for various reasons, but the most common reason a study is reviewed is for an intervention report. These reviews have specific inclusion criteria, such as the intervention type, for example, middle school math, or a population, middle school students or students with disabilities. Studies may also be reviewed for practice guides, which also have specific inclusion criteria, the same as intervention reports. Studies are also reviewed individually, such as when they're submitted as evidence to support a grant application, or because a study was funded by the Department of Education, or part of a training conducted by the regional educational laboratories, or because they have significant media attention. Studies reviewed for these reasons are reviewed under the RISP, or the Review of Individual Studies Protocols.
Great, thank you. And Herb, I'm hoping you can help us with the next question. It's, what protocols are used for grant competitions? I know this is on everyone's minds as they prepare for the EIR competitions.
Oh yeah, that's a great question and an important one. And so the WWC uses the RISP, as I mentioned earlier, to review studies, and Sarah also mentioned, to review studies submitted as evidence for grant competitions. Now, I know that I mentioned we had recommended using 4.0 as a starting point, but submissions for this year's grant competition will be reviewed under the RISP 3.1 protocol and the 3.0 standards and procedures in the handbooks. And the reason for this is the department's using the older version of the standards because of a regulatory update to move or to a more recent standard versions at this time has not happened because of a regulatory restriction. And so we would recommend using 3.1 protocol and 3.0 standards and procedures, and you can access that protocol following the instructions that Sarah provided in the webinar.
Great, thank you. So Sarah, you shared some really great information about the upcoming protocol template and guidance that's being developed by IES currently. Can you share when the protocol template will be available and how researchers and reviewers can use it?
Yeah, so the template will be ready to share by the end of the summer. The template's going to give protocol authors a useful guide for what to include in their protocols, and it'll standardize the order in which the information appears in the protocol. The guidance document will provide default approaches specified in the handbook with references and page numbers.
Great, looking forward to that. So Herb, earlier we talked a little bit about the different sections of the protocols and how they can be tailored and modified, but hoping you can help us understand, why does the WWC allow certain sections of protocols to be tailored or modified for topic-specific criteria? And also, is there any concern that this modification may introduce bias, or any concern that this means that not all studies are reviewed by the WWC using the same standards and procedures?
Well, let me begin by saying that, and as we had talked about in the webinar, the WWC protocols specify the key definitions, eligibility criteria, evidence standards, parameters, and literature search procedures for an intervention report, practice guide, or single study review. Now, the WWC Standards Handbook sets the evidence standards parameters. However, some of these parameters, as we talked about in the webinar, such as reliability of outcome measures, boundaries of allowable sample attrition, characteristics on which baseline equivalence should be established, and risk of bias from joiners in cluster design studies, are more accurately specified by the protocols written by topic area experts. And so I've given the example of the adolescent literacy protocol that sets the minimum reliability higher than the handbook. The handbook sets that minimum reliability at 0.50, whereas the adolescent literacy review protocol sets it at 0.60 to more accurately reflect the acceptable minimum for the topic area. And secondly, with respect to the other part of your question with respect to bias, one of the purposes of a WWC protocol is to actually reduce reviewer bias when applying the WWC standards and to incorporate topic area expertise into systematic reviews for the purpose, such as the preparation of the practice guide focused on particular populations of students and outcomes. So to reduce bias, the protocol must be approved by IES and published on the WWC website so that all aspects of the protocol, including the evidence standards, are established a priori and applied consistently by WWC reviewers across all studies reviewed for a WWC product.
Great, thank you. And Sarah, we heard Herb talk about the different versions of the protocols and the updates that are done each time there is a change in the standards and procedures. And the question that we have is, are study reviews under old protocols updated when a newer protocol is released? So thinking about how this would impact the study rating and the frequency and the rationale for doing that.
Yeah, so the WWC does not automatically re-review studies when a newer protocol is released. But in some instances, a study will be re-reviewed, especially if it was reviewed previously using the 2.0 standards or an earlier version of the standards. Some cases when studies are re-reviewed is when an intervention report or practice guide may be updated, or when a study has been cited as evidence in a current grant application.
Great, thank you. And Herb, a question I think that all researchers pose is thinking about how can I ensure that my study will meet WWC evidence standards? And so hoping you can help us out with that one.
Yeah, that is a popular one, Sarah. And of course, there's no recommended approach that can guarantee, and I would underline guarantee, a study meeting the WWC standards. However, at a minimum, to be eligible to receive a WWC rating, your study must use one of the designs eligible for a WWC review. That is a randomized controlled trial, quasi-experimental design, regression discontinuity design, or single case design. The chances will also be greater if you align the study design with the relevant topic area, practice guide, or RISP protocol, and report your study findings using the WWC reporting guides found on the WWC website. That is, so you can, the point here is you can have a well-implemented study that could meet standards, but it's also important that the study be reported well so that when the WWC reviewers go to review it, they can understand what was done. And the WWC reporting guides found on the website are an excellent resource for that purpose. Also, study authors interested in ensuring their study meets WWC standards are encouraged to view the online group design training modules and complete the WWC certification exam. And finally, the WWC has created numerous additional products, videos, infographics, and briefs that study authors may find useful in developing the study's design. You can find all of these products on the WWC's new resources webpage.
Great, thank you. And the final question that we have, Sarah, is focused on socio-emotional learning, or SEL, interventions. And so SEL has emerged as an important topic in education with research accumulating, but I don't see a protocol for SEL studies. So does the WWC plan to release one?
So currently, social emotional learning interventions are typically reviewed under the Supportive Learning Environment Interventions Review Protocol, and that includes social, behavioral, and academic outcomes. In addition, SEL programs can be reviewed under the RISP, which provides a broad range of outcomes. As I had said earlier, 9 different outcome domains. And as we mentioned previously, protocols are updated and revised to align with the most recent version of standards and procedures.
Great, thank you. So just a reminder to our participants, today's webinar will be archived on the WWC website, along with the questions and answers. And additional resources can be found on the WWC website, including the version 4.1 Standards and Procedure Handbooks, and previous webinars focused on the implementation and use of the WWC standards. I also want to highlight a recent presentation that included 3 of the WWC contract organizations, AIR, Mathematica Policy Research, and Apt Associates, in collaboration with IES for the Society for Research on Educational Effectiveness. And it focused on not only updates to the WWC standards and procedures for version 4.1, but also study review protocols. And so it too will serve as a great resource to address some of the questions that we posed today. The presentation was recorded and it will be made available on the WWC resources page over the next few weeks as well. If you do have additional questions about the study review protocols or the version 4.1 standards and procedures, we encourage you to submit your questions via the WWC Help Desk. This concludes our time for the webinar today. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us, whether it be from home or from the office, and also thank our presenters for increasing our familiarity with the WWC study review protocols. As a reminder, the statistics website and training team engages in webinars throughout the year to highlight important aspects of the WWC standards and procedures. Our planned webinars vary in topics. However, all share the goal of increasing familiarity and knowledge of the WWC standards and procedures. Previous webinars are archived on the WWC website's resources page. To learn more about the webinars offered by the WWC and IES, be sure to sign up to receive notices through the IES listserv. In the meantime, please reach out to the WWC Help Desk with questions related to the standards and procedures, study review protocols, and other general questions you may have about the WWC. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon.